Survivors of narcissistic abuse become part of the narcissist's facade. To many around us, when we were together, I think that people thought that we were this great couple. My ex is tall, she's good looking, and I wasn't the kind of chubby person that I am now. I think we looked kind of elegant and gave the appearance of a very happy couple in the beginning. And of course, that's the dream that we all defend when things are going wrong. We try to justify it. If people say how well matched you are as a couple, and you're just thinking about the incredibly horrible row that you had last night, well, what are you going to do? You're going to tell them? No, you end up styling it out, smiling along. In part, this pressure is because you desperately want that to be true, so there's inherently some denial going on there. But it's not just that, it's also the fact that this is what the narcissist wants. They want to have this portrayal to the public of this perfection. They don't want anyone to see what's been happening behind closed doors. Now, to a narcissist, everything emotionally is either all good or all bad. It's ideal or it's imperfect and rubbish. And that includes their emotional view of the world, reality, you, and themselves. There are no grades of nuance between these two poles. So internally, they cannot regulate their emotional view of the world, you, themselves. This is why they require some sort of external support. So if something's going wrong in their lives, they will blame the external. They'll not think about what it is that they could do to change things. Or indeed, if maybe what has happened is because they've got a bit of a bad memory recently, or they've not been sleeping enough, or whatever. It's not their fault. It's the outside's fault. It's the world's fault. It's your fault. I think for healthy people, wouldn't we agree? If there's a problem, we look at how we can solve it. And if there's a problem that it looks like has partly to do with us or wholly to do with us, we're going to look at it and we're going to try to see if we can work it out. But that's where a narcissist kind of fails at life. Because if they start looking inside and seeing themselves as even remotely culpable for anything, they don't just go to a little bit culpable and, oh, that's a bit shame, maybe I'll sort that out. No, they get to all bad and they just feel utter shame and they cannot regulate it. Why am I saying all this? Because they use us to regulate them. That's our purpose. It's to regulate their fall between good and bad. It's to try to keep them where the ideal exists, where it's all good. Or, if anything's all bad, it's the world around them, other people, or you. They can handle seeing you as all bad because they get to devalue you, which raises themselves artificially above you. They inherently cannot see the difference between themselves and others because they're stuck in this paranoid schizoid position before that could happen. So, in truth, yes, you are an object, as people say, but to them it's kind of like you're part of their psyche. You're part of their brain that doesn't work. In the weirdest, most twisted way possible, imaginable, a victim of a narcissist is kind of like a prosthetic limb, or something like that. It's some kind of prosthesis. So yeah, most of this goes on within the relationship and ends up with the victim being traumatized. But actually the role goes on outside too. These people are all about acquisition, and when they acquired their new toy, their new prosthesis, the dopamine levels were high because the number of receptor sites around the area of the brain that represented you were small in number. So you could say that their tolerance to dopamine when it comes from you as a source was low. This means their view of you and of the relationship and its potential was sickly sweet and ideal to the point of utter romanticism. So they are capable of perceiving and thinking of things we would see too as very beautiful, which is why we so heavily invested in them. We invested in a dream, a fantasy, a jewel fantasy. But the dopamine sites started to grow in number in the representation of you in their head, and so therefore their tolerance to that source of dopamine grew. They started to grow tired of this shiny new prosthesis that wasn't quite to them and to their minds so shiny anymore. And that's when the devaluing started. But in public, yeah, we became part of their facade. We continued to be, regardless of what was actually going on behind closed doors. And why? Our emotional investment in that person was not dopaminergic. It wasn't based in dopamine. It was based in oxytocin. So this means that we authentically bonded. But the bond is not really a bond for a narcissist. It's an acquisition of a source of supply, a source of dopamine. They were investing in the fantasy. We were investing in the fantasy too. But we were investing with something completely different. Oxytocin, authentic bonding. They were all investing with dopamine, inauthentic bonding. Despite what's going on back home, behind closed doors, you're still invested in the relationship authentically, but they are not. They are now in public with you, and they still see you as devaluable, but they get dopamine hits from other people seeing the facade. And they are still very, very much emotionally invested in the fantasy that is their false self. To them, the relationship is now a platform itself for supply acquisition. During these times out in public, you get to see the person that you met at the relationship's beginning once again. And so sometimes it gives you hope that actually their behavior there might carry on when you get back home. But it doesn't, does it? And don't forget, you're starting to blame yourself for all of this. So really you think that it's your duty to save the relationship, to get things to be right again, to make them ideal. So really it's hope that keeps us trapped, hope that keeps us invested, hope that keeps us part of the facade.